A financial advisor, 32 years old, decent salary. Life finally feels like it's coming together. And so you start spending like it. Weekend trips, a nicer apartment, the car upgrade you've been planning for 2 years, clothes that finally match the person you're becoming. I work hard. I deserve this. Or maybe you're the opposite, anxious about every purchase, paralyzed by financial decisions, saving money but with no real direction, just a vague fear of doing it wrong. Two completely different people. One common problem: neither has a clear picture of what they're actually building. Because here's what most people in their 30s don't see. Every dollar you spend or save right now is writing the script for who you'll be at 60. Not a metaphor, not a motivational line. Mathematics, pattern recognition, compounding reality. And today we're going to break down exactly how you're spending decisions right now, the ones that feel small, normal, justified, are actively choosing your future self, without your permission, without you even noticing. Why your 30s are the decade that decides everything. There's a narrow window where financial decisions carry the most leverage. Not your 20s income is still low, mistakes are recoverable, and the numbers are small enough that the damage is limited. Not your 40s and beyond, because compounding time is shorter. Obligations have hardened, and the habits are already cemented. Your 30s are the dangerous sweet spot. Income is high enough to make decisions that feel responsible but are quietly destructive. And time is still long enough that people underestimate how permanent those decisions become. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people treat their 30s like a rehearsal, like they're still figuring it out. Like 60 is so far away it's basically fictional. But 60-year-old you is not fiction. That person is being built right now, by your habits, by your defaults, by what you normalize. And the version of you that exists at 60, financially free or financially trapped, healthy or depleted, with options or without them, is largely determined by a set of decisions you're making in a decade you're still treating as the beginning. It's not the beginning. For your financial life, your 30s are the middle. And the middle is where the story actually gets written. Mechanism 1. The lifestyle lock-in. Let's start with the most invisible force shaping your financial future. Lifestyle lock-in. You get a raise, or a better job, or both. And almost automatically, your life expands to meet it. Nicer apartment, better restaurants, upgraded gym membership, more subscriptions. A car that reflects where you are now, not where you were 5 years ago. Each of these feels earned. Each feels proportionate. But here's what's actually happening. You're not just spending more money, you're raising your floor. Your floor is the minimum lifestyle you can psychologically tolerate. Once you've lived in a 2-bedroom apartment, going back to a studio feels like failure. Once you've eaten at good restaurants regularly, cooking every night feels like deprivation. Once you've flown business class even twice, economy starts feeling like punishment. And every time your floor rises, your financial flexibility drops, because now you're not choosing to spend that much. You need to spend that much. It's not a decision anymore, it's a requirement. This is why so many people in their 30s feel financially stuck despite earning significantly more than they did 5 years ago. The money didn't disappear. It went into maintaining a floor that quietly rose while they weren't paying attention. The people who arrive at 60 with options didn't necessarily earn more. They kept their floor low while their income grew. They let the gap between what they earned and what they needed widen over time, and they invested that gap. That gap is called financial margin. And it is the single most important number in your financial life. Not your salary, not your net worth, your margin. Because margin is what gives you choices. Margin is what lets you take a risk, change careers, weather a crisis, or retire 10 years earlier than anyone expected. Lifestyle lock-in is the slow, comfortable destruction of that margin. And it happens so gradually that most people don't notice until it's gone. Mechanism 2. The identity cost of what you buy. There's a second mechanism that almost nobody talks about. What you spend money on shapes who you become, not just financially, psychologically, neurologically. Every purchase you make is a small vote for a version of yourself. When you buy a gym membership and use it, you're voting for someone who prioritizes health. When you buy courses and actually take them, you're voting for someone who keeps growing. When you invest consistently, you're voting for someone who thinks long-term. But the reverse is also true. When you spend impulsively, you're voting for someone who prioritizes immediate comfort over future freedom. When you buy things to signal status, you're voting for someone whose identity depends on external validation. When you avoid thinking about money because it's stressful, you're voting for someone who is managed by money rather than managing it. These votes accumulate. By the time you're 60, you've cast tens of thousands of these votes. And they've shaped not just your bank account, but your habits, your defaults, your reflexes, and your sense of self. This is why financial change is so difficult for most people. It's not a math problem, it's an identity problem. You can't just change your budget. You have to change who you're voting for every time you open your wallet. The people who show up at 60 financially whole didn't just make better financial decisions. They built a different relationship with money over decades, one vote at a time. And the votes you cast in your 30s are the ones that set the trajectory. Because in your 30s, your habits are becoming structural. The patterns you build now won't feel like patterns by the time you hit 50. They'll just feel like who you are. Mechanism 3. The compounding they don't teach you. Everyone's heard about compound interest. Money grows on itself. Time makes it exponential. Start early, benefit massively. But there's a version of compounding that doesn't show up in financial textbooks. Habit compounding. Your habits compound exactly the same way money does. A person who spends impulsively at 32 doesn't just lose the money they spent. They reinforce the neural pathways that make impulsive spending easier next time. They normalize a decision-making pattern. They build a relationship with money that gets harder and harder to change as the years go on. Conversely, a person who builds discipline at 32 doesn't just save money. They're strengthening the part of their brain that can tolerate delayed gratification. They're making long-term thinking the default. They're building a version of themselves that gets better at financial decisions over time. The compounding of bad habits is just as real as the compounding of good ones. And this is what people miss when they think about the cost of their spending. They calculate, I spent $200 on this. That's $200 I don't have. But the real cost isn't the $200. It's the pattern. It's the compounding. It's the person that pattern is slowly building. $200 invested at 32 might be a few hundred extra dollars at 60. But the habit of investing, compounded over 30 years, might be the difference between retiring at 60 and working until 68 because you have no choice. The number is not the point. The pattern is the point. The spending categories that are building or destroying your future. Let's get specific. Not all spending is equal. Some categories of spending in your 30s are investments in your future self. Others are quiet debts against it. Health spending is almost always an investment. The version of you at 60 is largely determined by the decisions your 30-something self makes about sleep, movement, food, and stress. These aren't lifestyle expenses. They're maintenance on the most important asset you own. The people who show up at 60 with energy and vitality didn't get lucky. They paid for it in time, in money, in discipline decades earlier. Experience spending has a tipping point. Experiences can enrich your life and your perspective in ways that matter. But experiences bought to fill an emotional void, to keep up with peers, or to escape the discomfort of a life that isn't working, that spending is expensive and it solves nothing. The question isn't whether to spend on experiences. It's why you're spending on them. Status spending is almost always a debt against your future. The car that signals success. the apartment in the right neighborhood, the clothes that communicate belonging. This spending isn't really about the thing. It's about managing how others see you. And it is extraordinarily expensive not just in dollars, but in the financial margin it destroys and in the identity it locks you into. Asset-building spending is the one most people underinvest in. Skills that increase your earning power. Investments that compound over time. Health that extends your productive years. Relationships that create opportunity and support. These are the categories that 60-year-old you will be grateful for. And they are consistently undervalued by 30-year-old you, because their returns are invisible and delayed. The hidden variable. What you're not spending on. Here's the thing most spending analyzes miss entirely. It's not just about what you're buying. It's about what you're not building. Every dollar that goes to maintaining a lifestyle you've inflated leaves the building. It doesn't come back. It generates no future return. But every dollar that goes into an investment account, a skill, a health practice, or a high-leverage relationship is a dollar that keeps working after you stop. The person at 60 who has options didn't just spend less. They redirected spending toward things that compound. And the difference in outcome isn't proportional to the sacrifice. A relatively small reallocation moving 10 or 15% of spending from consumption to building can produce dramatically different outcomes over 20 to 30 years. This is the math that most people in their 30s never sit down and actually run. Because running the math is uncomfortable. Because it makes the cost of current habits impossible to ignore. The spreadsheet is not the problem. The willingness to look at it honestly is. The psychological trap. Why smart people don't change. So if this is all knowable, if the math is accessible, if the patterns are clear, why don't people change? 3 reasons. First, 60 feels fictional. The human brain is not built to care about abstract future versions of itself. Research on temporal discounting shows that people treat their future selves more like strangers than like themselves. When you're 32 and comfortable, 60-year-old you feels as real as a character in a book, but that character is not fictional, they're you. And they will inherit everything you're building or not building right now. Second, present spending is concrete. Future benefit is abstract. The pleasure of buying something today is immediate and real. The benefit of not buying it, the financial margin, the compound growth, the future flexibility is invisible and delayed. Your brain doesn't weight these equally. Present pleasure wins almost every time unless you build systems that override that bias. Third, social proof keeps you stuck. Everyone around you is spending this way. Your colleagues, your friends, your peers, they're all upgrading their lifestyle as their income grows. So it feels normal. It feels correct. The idea that you should be doing something radically different feels strange and antisocial. But the financial outcome of the average person in their 60s is not good. Median retirement savings in most countries are shockingly low. The majority of people arrive at 60 with far fewer options than they expected. Normal, in this case, is not a good destination. What 60 actually looks like? 2 versions. Let's be concrete about where this leads. Version 1, 60 with options. You have savings that cover your living expenses without depending on a paycheck. Your health is good because you maintained it. You have skills and relationships that still generate value and opportunity. You can work because you want to, not because you have to. You can help your children or your community. You can take risks. You can say no to things that compromise your values. This version is built by a 30-something who kept their lifestyle floor low, invested the margin consistently, treated their health as an asset, and built skills that compounded over time. Version 2, 60 with obligations. You're still working not because you love it, but because the bills don't stop. The house, the cars, the lifestyle that felt earned in your 30s now feels like a trap. Your health is costing you in ways you didn't plan for. The margin for error is gone. The options are limited. This version is built by a 30-something who confused a high income with financial security, who raised their lifestyle floor as their income grew, who treated every raise as permission to spend more. Neither version happens suddenly. Both are built slowly, decision by decision, over the decade you're in right now. The question that changes everything. There's one question that, if you ask it consistently, can restructure how you think about spending. Not can I afford this? You can afford most things. That's not the question. The real question is this building the version of me I want to be at 60, or is it borrowing from them? Some spending builds. It invests in your health, your skills, your relationships, your financial margin. Some spending borrows. It consumes resources that could have compounded. It raises your floor. It makes your future self less free. The goal isn't to stop spending. It's to spend in a direction. The people who arrive at 60 with options aren't the ones who deprive themselves. They're the ones who got intentional, who decided what they were building, who aligned their spending with that decision, even imperfectly, even gradually. Closing. The doctor with $400 million in debt. The engineer who earns $30 million a month and has nothing to show for it. They're not reckless people. They're not irresponsible people. They're people who never stopped to ask what they were building, who confused income with security, who let habits form by default instead of by design. And by the time the picture became clear, the patterns were already structural. You don't have to be them. But the window where the decision is easy is not infinite. Every year that passes, the habits get more embedded. The obligations get harder to exit. The cost of changing gets higher. The best time to get intentional about your spending was 5 years ago. The second best time is right now. Not because 60 is close, because it's being built to day one purchase, one pattern, one habit at a time. And the version of you that exists at 60 will have an opinion about the choices you're making this week. The only question is whether you'll give them something to be grateful for.